Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here.
Good morning, everyone. It's Mikki here, and you are listening to Mikkipedia. And this week on the podcast, I speak to Jeff Pelletier, an ultra-distance trail runner and filmmaker, member of Team Salomon Canada, and a prolific content creator that showcases run training and competing, bringing to life his adventures in a way that inspires over 50,000 people that are subscribed to his YouTube channel. Such an inspiration. As I've said before, Jeff really helped keep us motivated across 2021 when we were unable to go out and do those trails. So Jeff and I discuss his introduction to running, what inspired him to turn his channel into an avenue that is interesting, educational and inspirational, the races and adventures he's enjoyed the most, how he organises himself for the longer distance events, including his training, his strength training and nutrition, his recent UTMB race, and what he's got coming up in the next year. That includes a couple of tour adventures, a hike in March, Patagonia, and of course the Mont Blanc Trail as a fast pack in August 2022, and I believe there are still spots available to that. As I said, Jeff, he runs a video production agency and also produces running films and documentaries for brands, as well as, of course, his own YouTube channel. Highly recommend checking out that YouTube channel. We have a link in the show notes to that, and also all of his information, which you can find over at jeffpelletier.com. So be sure to check out the links in the show notes for that. It is just awesome. Before we jump on into the interview though, I'd just like to remind you the best way that you can support Mikkipedia is to hit subscribe at your favourite podcast platform and then leave a 5-star review. So the people that I am privileged enough to engage with and get information from can be shared much wider than they would otherwise. So that would just be amazing if you could do that. All right, team, please enjoy the conversation that I had with Jeff Pelletier.
Of course, we've got the Tarawera race, but also all the great walks as well that you guys could fast pack.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. So Jeff Pelletier, thank you so much for taking time to chat to me this morning. And I have to say, I think it was probably about a year ago that we came across your YouTube channel, and we were in the midst of our very long lockdown, and it was like this little beacon of light of look at all the things that we could be doing, and that you guys were out there with your stage racing and your race reports and stuff like that. So it was such good motivation and inspiration.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, that was, it was actually funny because during the lockdown is when I sort of really kind of ramped up activity on my channel. It happened that I had a bunch of things kind of in the can ready to edit. So I think it was a good opportunity as well for me to sort of reprioritize and think about what's important to me. And a big part of that is travel. So coming out of it now, I've really been able to capitalize on that and do a lot of traveling. And again, kind of help me to focus on what's really important to me.
Yeah, interesting. So I was having a look at your website, Jeff, and you were blogging since what was it, 2013, or like for several years before you started sort of your, I suppose, focusing much more on your YouTube channel, or at least that's how it appeared. But you sort of describe yourself as a late bloomer when it comes to running, per se.
Yeah, I mean, I started running when I turned 27, I think it was. And I remember I had read somewhere that 27 is supposed to be sort of your peak fitness as a guy. And, that's I didn't feel like I was at the peak of much at the time. And it just happened that a good friend of mine was training for a marathon. And he ended up hurting his back, and he said, "Hey, I've got this book by Hal Higdon, How to Run Your First Marathon. Do you want it?" And I thought, hey, well, if you can do it, maybe I can. And so I trained for my first marathon. I did a half marathon first, and then a marathon, and kind of got the running bug. And the rest is history. I did a bunch of road races, and about three and a half years into my running journey, so right as I turned maybe 30, I found trail running and eventually longer distance races as well.
Yeah. And so, Jeff, you have a video production agency, as I understand it. So one of the things actually we were wondering, so when I say we, me and my husband Baz, who is he loves trail running and loves video editing and stuff like that as well. And we were trying to figure out what had come first. Was it your videoing or was it your running? But clearly that's your sort of career or profession. What inspired you to start sort of taking that leap into combining the two, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I had been kind of blogging for a while, and that was sort of as I started my running journey. And pretty early on, I became an athlete ambassador working with Salomon, sort of at the store level, working with one of our local Salomon store. And so part of that was I would do race reports, trip reports, and things like that, just the odd blog post. And then, Instagram popped up, and a lot of people kind of stopped blogging and started just using Instagram instead to tell stories and document their kind of training and racing. I kind of did the same, but I've been a video producer, running a video production agency my entire life, basically my entire working career. So at some point I started kind of filming my running as well. I published a couple of films of a couple of hikes, some treks and things early on. So my YouTube channel has a few older films on there. One from Nepal, for example, from about 10 years ago. But I didn't really start to feel like, it's a lot of work to make these videos. And so it was kind of after my first big race, my first 200-mile race, Tour des Géants in the Italian Alps. I brought my GoPro, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with that, but then I decided kind of during the race, hey, I'm capturing lots of great footage here. Maybe I'll make this into a documentary. So when I got home, I edited it and I did a voiceover and things. And that film kind of took off. I mean, it's got about, I think, 350,000 views now, but it really, even initially, got a lot of momentum because it happens to be one of the biggest races in the world. It's one of the more popular ones. And I was able to tell an engaging story. It's a very long race. You get very tired, but I think one of the things that I do well is I'm able to film when I'm tired because it does come naturally to me. I can think about coverage and angles and shots sort of as second nature. And then, so that was kind of coming out of, I took a while to edit that. So it was sort of in 2020 that I thought, maybe I can keep doing this, right? So my next race was another 200-miler. I filmed it again. And with each film, I was able to build my audience. So it kind of happened naturally and then all at once. It happened slowly and then all at once. I didn't decide one day to start a YouTube channel. I sort of had a place where I would publish the odd video. And then somewhere, like I was saying at the beginning, it was somewhere during the pandemic where I decided no, this is actually, now I'm going to really invest time and energy into this and money into buying new equipment. And I'm really going to give this YouTube thing a go. So that was only in the last couple of years, really. But I had the skill set. I didn't have to learn how to film, learn how to edit. I've only been working on the craft as it specifically relates to YouTube, how to tell stories on YouTube. That's a little bit different. The only other thing I would say that changed a little bit over the years is that, GoPros, the cameras I typically use when I'm running, they've gotten to a point now where the quality is quite good. Yeah. And that only happened a few years ago as well. So, I mean, if we rewind back to 2013, say, when I first kind of started running, the cameras were pretty bad. And so I don't think I would have been inspired to really do a lot of filming at the time. So the timing just happened to line up as well, where the gear, it's light, it's high quality, and it lends itself well to outdoor adventure filmmaking.
Yeah, amazing. Actually, slight tangent, but when I did my first sort of big run around, there's a trail here in New Zealand called the Waikato Moana, and so it's a hike. And so I was running with a mate, and he worked for the Department of Conservation at the time. And he had this massive backpack on. And I'm like, oh, what's in that? And he's like, it's a GPS. So what we can do is we can stop. So we had to stop every 10 kilometers, and he would put down his backpack, and it was massive. And he would be able to trace where we'd come from, which is quite a bit different from the watch that probably you and I are both both wearing now.
Yeah,
but it's
come a long way.
It's come a long way in a particularly short period of time. Were you surprised, Jeff, by the interest in your, I suppose, the level of engagement that you have gotten with your YouTube channel? I always wonder that how people, so you're not an overnight success by any stretch of the imagination, because as you say, you've got years of experience, but were you surprised by the interest in how people just really sort of, like us over the other side of the world, started engaging with you in your YouTube channel, and then of course come across you on Instagram, and then suddenly you've got this audience? Was that, I mean, I guess it was your intention, but is it a surprise to you thinking?
Well, no, definitely. It's been a pleasant surprise, especially recently. This year, I've been experimenting with a new series called my Training Diaries, where it's a weekly series. And I was hesitant at first because I'm thinking, who am I to tell my story? I mean, it's one thing documenting a race. A lot of people might want to do that race. So they're sort of looking for intel, and some of these places are quite beautiful, but who am I to be doing a weekly video vlog, right? And it turned out that that's getting a lot of good engagement, because I think people don't necessarily want to hear from just the outliers, the fastest runners. They can learn from, I wouldn't call myself a mid-packer, but sort of a, top 10 percentile runner, like where my approach to training is something anybody can do. And it's more accessible. And I've only been running for 10 years, so I don't have an athletic background. So I think maybe the lesson there I learned is that I have a lot to teach as well, and people can learn from me as well. And it's more about doing that on a regular basis, being consistent and kind of showing up. And also trying to, I do focus on quality, so that, I try to respect my audience's time, and try to be concise and script everything and plan everything. And I think people respond well to that. But the other thing I learned early on too is that, again, I would do these films from races, and then people would say, well, now I want to know how you trained for that. What kind of gear did you use? What kind of shoes do you use? And so it became, a lot of that stuff was in response to the questions people were asking. So it's not like I went out there saying, I'm here to teach you something. I've made these films, and now I'm here to just answer all the questions I keep getting. So clearly people wanted to hear about those things from me. And again, I think I had to sort of get over my imposter syndrome a little bit to be able to take that on, to become sort of a teacher. And I am careful, though, to when I make my content, to not say, this is how you should do it. All I say is, this is how I do it. This is my approach to nutrition, to training. Take it or leave it. All I'm here to do is tell you what's worked for me. Yeah, no, and I agree with you. First in that, I think people do love hearing from other runners who are either at their level or at slightly above, because we can almost relate better to the challenges that you come across and the experiences that you have, because we can't really compare ourselves to the Kilian Jornet or Courtney Dauwalter or, because they... Nor should we. It's dangerous to do that. Exactly, right. And I feel similarly with regards to your ability to attract sponsors and things like that, because I feel like companies are now much more aware of the fact that whilst they can sponsor and should support those who are the elite in our sport, actually supporting other people who have the same passion, but put in a lot of the same time, and actually are able to represent probably their greater audience more, makes more marketing sense for them as well, I guess. Yeah. And I think there's something else going on too, which, I mean, this could be a whole hour-long conversation. I have a video about this too, which is what sponsors are really looking for in athlete ambassadors these days. It's really shifted, because there was a time when they just wanted the fastest athletes to show up and win. They wanted the Wayne Gretzkys, the Michael Jordans, and then there'd be all this free press that would come from that. But that's obviously shifted now with social media, where as an ambassador, you're the athlete or the model, you're the writer, the strategist from the content perspective, you're the photographer, you're the publisher, you're all of those things. And so the value is less about how you're performing, it's how your content is performing. And whether you're winning races or not is sort of secondary to that. So so you're really a content creator first and an athlete second in that sense. So as a content creator, I think I am able to, make content that resonates and it holds, it's longer form content. I'm not on TikTok. That's not, I find it hard to tell a story in 30 seconds, but I can tell a good story in 30 minutes. And I think it becomes, you can create a more emotional relationship with people. They're more engaged. And with that, I've been able to work with sponsors almost when I do proposals, for example, I sell the deliverable. I'll say, I'm going to this race and making a film about this race, and here's how long it will be. And so they're sponsoring the project as much as me as an athlete. And that's sort of how my relationships with my sponsors has evolved. And it's been a win-win, I think, and will continue to hopefully be as my channel grows.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I saw that, and I think that's that might be one video. Have we watched that one? That might be the one we actually haven't watched. We've watched basically most of it. When we came across your channel, it was like, I'm a reader, and when I come across an author and I know that I've seen that they've written 17 books, I'm so excited, which is how we felt about your channel when we came across it last year.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks. Or it's like coming across a new band and you realize, oh my God, they have a back catalog of 10 albums. Like, this is a treasure trove, right? So no, I appreciate it. And that is my goal as well with my content, where I always try to make my content evergreen, which in a marketing sense means that it's not dated. It's not, so I try to avoid reviews or, I do the odd review and the odd video that could become dated, but I want that to be the case. I want somebody to discover one video and go, what else does this guy have on his channel? And be able to just binge video after video, as opposed to going, I'll have to wait till next week because there's nothing else nothing else to see here. There's no other value. And in that way too, it's been exciting. It's been fun because I feel like I'm building a portfolio, like I'm building a body of work that can sort of last hopefully for years online, as long as YouTube's around. And if not, maybe I can publish it elsewhere one day.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you mentioned your training diaries, and again, I'm one of those people who were so stoked when you started doing them, just because it is so interesting to get. I think people love the connection, or the human connection, that you can get through YouTube, social media, and that kind of thing. So to see how you go about your sort of how you do it on a weekly basis, even though a lot of the time you report the same, you're doing a lot of the same things, but we're still there for it because it's little side stories that you tell of your weekend sort of runs, or the pizza that you eat afterwards, or the beer that you're drinking at the time, it's all of that stuff that we quite like engaging with. And of course, catching up with how Audrey's training is going.
Right.
That's always something I enjoy tuning into as well. Jeff, the most recent, just before we move on to your actual running, because I really want to chat to you about that, how long does it take for you to edit your sort of usual training diaries, or that one first?
Yeah, I mean, the training diaries, and it's funny, I'm actually just today, I've been working on this, my last episode 26, which is a behind the scenes look at how I make those videos. So it's going to walk everybody through that. Those videos, my goal initially was to try to turn them around quickly. So I set myself this weekly cadence. It's not always publishing on a Tuesday. This week's going to be a few days late. And I think I did miss 1 week when I was racing this year. Maybe there was two. Anyway, it's roughly every week. And that forces me to be fairly efficient and to have a fairly standardized format for the videos. So some weeks I go off of that format. It takes a little bit longer. Other weeks it's a little quicker. But generally, I'm sort of scripting, I'm ideating, I'm collecting ideas throughout the week and throughout the year. And then when I sit down to script, it's a couple of hours, depending on how much research I need to do. Some are quicker than others. I'll film, that takes about an hour. And then I'll edit, which can take anywhere from about 4 hours to maybe 2 days, because sometimes I'm editing a lot of B-roll. But roughly, I can make an episode, I would say, on average from start to finish in about 8 hours. That's sort of the turnaround there. My films are a different story. So some of my films, I'll spend anywhere from 40 to maybe 100 hours. My Racing Namibia series, for example, was 2.5 hours of content. I wish I would have tracked it. I think when I tried to estimate it, I estimated somewhere like 150 hours of work on that series, possibly more. Yeah. And that's excluding the filming, of course. That's just the post-production. So some of these films take quite a bit of time. So, I mean, right now I have probably I don't know, 300 hours of work backlogged that I have to get through this fall, just in editing alone from the content that I shot this summer.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that, I imagine a large part of that will be the UTMB that you've just completed. How's your recovery going?
Recovery is good. I mean, it's been a couple of weeks now. I probably overcompensated on the recovery. I haven't been doing as much active recovery as I should be. I've just done a couple short runs. But I didn't really take much recovery time after my first race of the year in the country of Georgia.
Yes.
I kind of had to go right into my training for UTMB. So I've sort of I wanted to give myself a week or two just to not think about running. And I've done that now, and I'm starting to ramp back up a little bit. Recovery has been great, though. It's mostly... After a 100-mile run, I find it's not my legs. My legs, I can go for a run in 2 days because you're not always running a lot. It's a lot of hiking in those races. But what happens is you'll start running and I feel good. Like my legs feel good. And then 25 minutes in, the fatigue just hits you. Like it just washes over you. So you really have to be careful. It's that fatigue. It's all of your other systems, your organs. I mean, everything that have been taxed.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm personally letting recover, as well as my mind, as I said, because I don't want to burn out. So my legs were fine. They were good to go a week ago. But now finally, I think my mind is also ready to get back to training.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've been waiting for here.
Yeah, and that's such an important point as well, because when you come off a race, be it that you get the result that you were expecting or it's, different, it's your motivation to get back out there. When you're really spent, that can take some time to sort of build back. So if you go back too quickly, you're right, you can get that burnout. But sometimes the enthusiasm coming off a really great race, you almost want to get back out the next week and start training for the next thing. So it's knowing how to rein that in.
And we always joke, I mean, in North America, there's a website called ultrasignup.com, which is the main search and registration website for races.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's international. I think it's just North America. And we always joke like there should be like a 48-hour period where you're locked out of the website following a race. It's like, you're right. You come back and you go, I want to jump back into the next one. You're so enthusiastic about it. You're on a bit of a high. And then some people even experience a bit of I don't know, it's like a postpartum, like a depression after, because you've lost this goal. You had this massive goal, singular focus for a lot of us, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And so it can be tempting to set a new goal right away just to have something to train for. And I think that is important to eventually do. But for me, it's not just even the psychological burnout and things. It's the fact that, when you're training, especially for these really long races, you're sacrificing a lot. Like you really are focusing on, and what I mean is you're sacrificing social relationships, seeing your family, things that are important, but you've kind of put off. And so for me, it's like right after a race, I'm calling all my friends I haven't seen in a while and saying, let's go for beers. Like, I'm free. Like I don't have to think about my nutrition. I can, like my family, like I overcorrect and try to say, let's go, let's get together with my parents more than I did before. Cause that's a great couple of weeks where I can just do nothing but socialize. Right. Whereas again, it's tough to do that when you're getting up at 5 a.m. the next day for a training run. So I think it's important to, like I said, like shift and just forget about running for a couple of weeks after something like a 100-mile race and refocus on what's important. That would be especially important for people who have kids. I mean, Audrey and I don't have kids, so it's really more about seeing my parents and some of my good friends. And I should say some of my friends who aren't runners.
Yes.
It's very easy to end up being where you realize, I only ever hang out with my running friends. And of course, we all have relationships outside of running as well that need to be nurtured. So
yeah, nice. And now you mentioned music just in one of our just earlier in the call, and I did see on your website you mentioned that you played music. Now, are you playing music because you enjoy listening to music? Are you actually playing music like as one of your interests?
Yeah, I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar since I was like 10. So yeah, I play a lot of guitar, classical guitar, and different styles. So when I have time, again, I've been playing a lot in the last couple of weeks because I didn't play a lot over the summer. I didn't even have a guitar for 3 months. I was traveling. So I've been overcorrecting there and spending about 2-3 hours a day playing, which is really fun.
Oh, amazing. And favorite bands, Jeff?
Tough to say. I mean, I listen to, I like like a lot of progressive rock. I like a lot of punk rock and some death metal and like different things. But a lot of kind of folk music, like kind of all over the map. So
yeah. Okay. So I just tangented off. And actually interesting what you say about having that psychological sort of break from running, which might be a bit more challenging for someone like you, who then you need to sort of focus your attention on the editing of all of the running that you've been doing, like a little bit harder.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm not truly taking a break from running as a sport. It's more just from the physical act of running. So yeah, I'm definitely, obviously right now in doing all this editing, I'm reliving my racing and my adventures from the summer. So
yeah. Do you find you can get a bit of reflection when you do that? So, I mean, obviously you've just finished the UTMB. Are you like looking back at some of what you've been doing and reflecting on how you could have done things differently or might do things differently next time? Is this a good opportunity to do that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when I'm making a film about it and I'm basically scripting a commentary, like I really am shaping the story, and it forces me to think like, did I have a good race? And what would I do differently? And what's my, what's my angle, right? am I telling the story of success, or is there, was there a turning point? Like I am, as much as documentaries are, truthful, they're not about truth telling, they're storytelling.
Yeah.
So sometimes you shape things or you exclude certain things because they're sort of, you might not have enough footage, or it might be just not important to the overall story. And then other times you embellish some aspects of it because you want to create sort of a bit of drama. And so it does force me during that process to really think hard about the race. But I tend to do that anyway. I'm pretty analytical. So I mean, I'm analyzing my race like most of us do as it's happening and as soon as it's done. And I do, UTMB was a good example of that, where I've kind of said in a couple of my recaps, like I didn't feel like I had a great race, but it went pretty well. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed it overall, so I'd call it a success. But there's a lot of things I would improve. That was mainly around my training in retrospect. And it took me a couple of days of sort of contemplation to arrive at that conclusion and to really formalize my thoughts around that. But I think that's common for most people. The filmmaking process does help to further crystallize that a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Was that your second time of doing UTMB? Am I right?
No, that's my first time actually racing UTMB. We had done the route.
Okay.
So we had done the Tour de Mont Blanc a few weeks before.
That's
right.
It
felt like we had done it before. It was very fresh. Both Audrey and I were kind of joking. It was almost too fresh. You knew every false summit coming up and every climb. And, I remembered a lot of the routes and rocks. And, I remember what line I took coming down this. And so it was both good and bad to have done it so soon before the route. And
did you enjoy then the time that you spent in Chamonix, but also around the area prior? Because you were there you visited it, came back, you had a bit of a to and
yeah,
from.
And that was the third time I was at the event, UTMB. So I'd been in the area for twice before other races. So I sort of knew what to expect. And it's a crazy week. Like it's insane. It's so busy. It's noisy. It's hectic. It's exciting. But you have to be careful because if you're racing, you have to make sure you find some downtime in that excitement as well. We were there the first week when we first arrived and then did the fast pack of the Tour de Mont Blanc of the route. And then, of course, we came back later in the month, a few days before the race, UTMB, which does the same route, basically. Both times we were in Chamonix, and it was a completely different experience. 2 weeks on, it felt like a totally different place and totally different energy. So it was kind of fun seeing the contrast. But it was also, I think, important that we did step away in the middle. We were able to relax and taper. And, we had some work to do in between. We were working remotely from Europe. And so it was nice that I think we didn't spend too much time around all that excitement, because it can, it's kind of like when you go to any race, you travel to, say, Chicago for the Chicago Marathon, and it's so tempting to explore the city and, you should be staying off your feet.
Yeah.
And so it's, there's a balance there when it comes to traveling for races where, you want to take in a place. That's why we do destination races to begin with. But you do have to make sure that you're sort of preparing for your race, both mentally and physically as well.
Yeah. And you do a range of races out over a range of distances. But is there something particular about the long events that you like you just seem to have done like quite a few more, well, not quite a few more, but quite a few of the 100-mile, 200-mile races, things like that. Is there something particular about that you really enjoy?
Well, yeah, and I can tell you how I got into ultra distance running in the first place. So I had done, like I said, when I first started running, my goal was, it was a bucket list thing to run a marathon. I ended up running 3. And with each one, I got a little bit faster, but we're talking maybe 5-10 minutes. And it got to a point where I thought, is this going to be my running career where every year I train my butt off for 6 months to maybe shave off 3 minutes if everything goes exactly perfectly? So you get these diminishing returns with road running. And at the same time, at this place I was training at, I met a guy who was training for a 50-mile, I believe it was at the time, ultra marathon. And he was telling me about these ultra marathons. And I thought, that's what you're telling me, you run double as long? Like, this is crazy. And then he's like, well, if you think that's far, you should hear about these 100-mile runs. And so he opened my eyes to what was possible, what I could target instead of targeting, can I shave 4 minutes off my marathon time? It's, can I run this distance at all? Can I even run 50 miles or 100 miles? And the variability of these different races means you're not comparing times. Every race is different. There's new challenges. There's weather, altitude, elevation change. There's all these new variables to contend with. And it just sort of renewed my interest in the sport, and it became this whole new set of challenges. And so if you take that further, then logically at some point, the same thing happened to me, even with 100-milers. It's no longer a question of whether I can finish one. I mean, I've done a half dozen now. The question now is, how quickly can I do it? Am I going to finish in 26 hours or 24 hours? And that's where the 200-milers come in. Because now it's, can I even do 200 miles or 220 in the case of Swiss Peaks 360K? So it's this new sort of and now it's, well, I can do that. So what's next? What about multi-day racing? That's a whole new set of challenges. You're carrying your own gear and food, and so it's always about kind of, I think, keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, and that's basically just, I think that will continue for me. I've yet to find a distance that I can't finish. I've yet to DNF a race. I've yet to find where that limit is, and I do want to find that limit for myself. I don't know what that will be, but hopefully I can, keep pushing myself until I discover that. Yeah,
actually, it's that one of my questions was, have you ever DNF'd? But I do understand that you did go off course on a race and end up tacking on an extra 10 miles on a 120-mile race, like.
Right. Yeah. That was one of my, I ran 130 miles that time.
Oh, geez.
But that was, I think that, actually that was funny because with that race, it was that, going off course really during that race, it really helped me to refocus. And I had a new goal that time, which was now the challenge is even harder. And can I finish this 130-mile race, yet alone 120? So sometimes those challenges where in the moment it feels like disaster, you can turn them around and use them as motivation.
Yeah.
And so the motivation there was, well, can I come back from this mistake? And I did. So that was a good example of where ultra running is all about, and this is especially true the further you go.
Yeah.
It's about troubleshooting. It's about overcoming unforeseen challenges. And so we try to mitigate the risks. We try to set ourselves up for success, and we learn how to do that through experience. But there's never a race where you aren't solving problems in the moment. It can be problems with your feet, with your stomach, with the weather, going off course, you name it. And those kind of things don't happen in road running. Road running is about executing perfectly. So it's either you did it perfect or you didn't. You either hit your exact 4:32 per kilometer target or you didn't. There's none of this sort of like in an ultra marathon where you can literally be at the back of the pack. I've seen this, and make your way forward and win the race. I mean, this happens, right? So people can come back. We say, if you feel good, wait an hour. If you feel bad, wait an hour. A lot can happen in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So yeah. So I think that makes it more. It's less about pure athleticism. It's more about strategy and the mental fortitude and thinking your way through things. And for someone like me, this kind of goes back to your original question. I'm not a natural athlete. I have to really think my way through things.
Yeah.
And when it comes to sports, that's why I'm not great at like downhill skiing and mountain biking. I don't have those natural reflexes, but I'm really good at thinking my way through a 100-mile race or a 200-mile race where you're having to solve a dozen problems along the way and sort of fight the desire to stop along the way. And in the meantime, you're just putting one foot in front of the other. But that's about it when it comes to the physical aspect.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right, is how I feel when because I often feel apprehensive, even at the start of like a long training run. I'm like, oh, now I've got to go and run 5 hours. And I'm like, right,
yeah.
But actually in 5 hours, it'll be done. So I'll just have to, be in the moment and enjoy it. And I think that's, for me, that has come with doing more of it, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I still, if I can just add one more thought there, having said all of that, that's about my own strengths and weaknesses. I still don't think that the pursuit of distance for the sake of distance is necessarily the most noble thing.
Yeah.
I always like to say, I find it way more impressive if you can train for and execute a really well-run 10K or half marathon. Fast half marathon. That's more impressive than sort of walking a 50K to the finish, just so you can say you did it. I mean, a lot of what we're doing out there is really just hiking and taking photos and enjoying ourselves in the mountains. The athletic challenge of properly training and running fast for those shorter distances, to me, is equally as impressive, if not more so.
Yeah, yeah. And your training appeared to have quite a bit of speed-related stuff in it, actually, Jeff, for a 100-mile race. And I guess everyone does things differently. And you did mention that you've been reflecting on how you may have done UTMB a little bit differently and how your training sort of came into that. What might you change going forward if you were to do UTMB again, or for your next sort of miler?
Yeah, so it wasn't actually what I would do differently. It's more just that my goal for UTMB didn't reflect what my training was. Yeah. So my time goal, I had set an arbitrary time goal of what I wanted to run sub 30 hours. And knowing what I know now about the course, my training did not reflect a 30-hour run. So the race is, you can't pull anything out of the hat. The race is just the last of your runs that you've done as part of your training. Yeah. I mean, you train, taper, then you race. But it's all about the training that led up to it. It's about the plan and how well you executed the plan. And then on the day, that's just the last of the long runs, basically. There's nothing new or different. It's rare that you surprise yourself on race day. It's usually a reflection of your training. And my training did not reflect a 30-hour UTMB. I trained mostly leading up till June for my first race in Georgia. And that was a staged race where I was carrying a large pack. Most of my runs, I was carrying a large pack. But more importantly, most of my long runs were on very rolling or flat terrain, because that's what Georgia was going to be. I then only had a couple of weeks to quickly recover and start training again. And really, I only had 1 month of training for UTMB. Yeah. So I did 1 month of hill work and mountains. And I did some. I went to Colorado, and then we were in Europe. We did the TMB. So that 1 week on the Tour de Mont Blanc was amazing. But logically, if I was targeting the race, I would have done 2 or 3, 4 months of that in a row. And that's what you would do for a 30-hour, for me at least. If I really was planning on that fast of a UTMB, I would have done 4 months of dedicated hill work and, big days in the mountains, and not done Georgia first. Yeah. So I don't think it was a mistake doing it the way I did. I think the mistake was then not acknowledging that and setting my goal appropriately. So I did recalibrate about midway through the race, where I was kind of doing some math and thinking like, maybe 32 hours, then maybe 34 hours. And I fortunately was able to get to a place where I was happy with that. And I was like, no, that's fine. I'm enjoying myself. My stomach feels good. I'm eating lots. I'm getting lots of great footage. I've met a lot of fun people, and I'm still passing people, making my way up towards the, further towards the front of the field anyway. And so I was able to finish feeling good about my performance, my execution, again, given where my training was.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a great explanation. And I've had a similar race. We mentioned Tarawera at the start of the call, and I went in thinking, this will be 7.5 hours. But then after walking for the first hour on a single track, and it was persisting down with rain the entire day, I very quickly went, oh no, this will be 10. Okay, I'm good with that. But it's that managing expectations, even in the moment.
Adjusting along the way, maybe recalibrating.
Yeah.
I see this happen. We all make this mistake where especially when we go back and do the same event, maybe years later. So maybe a lot of us ran a certain race, say pre-COVID, and then now 3 years later, we're going back to do the same race. And we think, great, well, last time I ran it in 7 hours, this time I want to run it in 6.5. But you might forget that 3 years ago, you were younger, fitter, maybe your training just went better that season. And so you have to take those things into account. You can't just assume you're going to get faster every time you do the same race. And I think sometimes people lose track of that. And then they think, no, Actually, last time I did do a lot more training. I had I didn't have kids at the time. I had a different job, whatever it might be. And so again, I think our performance at a race really does just reflect our training. And that's just about doing the work, putting the time in, yeah, and being smart about it, trying to show up on race day healthy, not overtrained, but we need to recognize when we show up undertrained, that's okay, but we need to adjust our expectations accordingly.
Yeah, completely. And you mentioned that your nutrition went well on the UTMB.
I ate a lot, so that's a success.
Yeah.
I think, we joke a lot about ultra marathons being an eating contest. Killian said that himself on Twitter just after UTMB. And what you're not going to win a race by eating a lot, but you are going to have a horrible race by not eating enough. You can't finish 100 miles. You can't be on feet for 24 to 48 hours without taking in food, without calories. You have to think about macronutrients as well, like protein and things, especially the longer you go. Of course, electrolytes and hydration. And one thing I did well at this race was I ate a lot. And in fact, I was a little bit bloated at times where I'm like, oh, maybe I'll take a half hour off the food. But that's a good place to be. You can always scale back the food intake. It's hard to catch up. I ate a lot of the food at the aid stations. And then I also was supplementing with a drink mix powder from a brand called NAC here in Canada. And that actually had some protein and amino acids in it as well, which I think helped me as well, especially with my recovery. Actually, that helped me get a jump start on that recovery.
Yeah.
So I took in just a steady stream of calories from that. And then again, food from the aid stations. And that's definitely one thing I think that helped to avoid any serious low points. I didn't really have any moments where I was thinking about quitting, for example. And I think that's one thing I did really well, where I executed well, was on my nutrition.
Yeah, nice. And is that a strategy you've developed over time? Is it the liquid nutrition? Is it a newer thing? NAC was new for you in UTMB, am I right?
Yeah, well, that's ironically, that's actually something I used to do when I first started running. Coming off of road running, using powders is quite common. And maybe gels. And then as I progressed in distance, you start to rely less on that kind of stuff and eating more kind of, real food, solid foods, especially when you're doing 200 milers. You're not, sugar isn't sustainable. You get a lot of spikes and crashes. And I think I overcorrected there. I went too far that way and forgot about the benefit of drink mix powders. Now, having said that, and I've always said this, and I still believe this, I don't think that they're a good strategy as your sole nutrition source, but I think they're a great supplement.
Yeah.
And that's what I did this time. So with the NAC powder I was using, I estimated I drank almost 3,000 calories worth over whatever it was, 34 hours. So I estimated about 100 calories an hour. And that meant that I was getting a very slow drip of 100 calories, combined with spikes of, 200 calories here, 300 calories there when I take a gel, eat a bar, or have like a bowl of soup or something at the aid station. But in those moments where I was maybe hiking and I'm tired and the last thing I want to do is stop and eat a bar, I could just be sipping on my drink mix powder and getting a little bit of calories in. And that helps at least to keep your brain fed. Your brain is one of the smaller organs in your body, but it takes up something like 25% of the calories you burn.
Yeah.
And so when we're low on calories, that's one of the first things that stops working, and we start making poor decisions. And so I always say, like, if you're in trouble in the backcountry, stop and eat. That's the first thing. Before you make any big decisions, stop, eat, and think, assess, make an informed decision with food in your system. And so I think that's where, again, that slow drip of calories does help to just keep you thinking straight. But I do think it's dangerous as a sole source because it can be easier to fall back on it. If you fall back on your hydration, now you're behind on your food as well. Or if you run out of water, you can't drink your powder, right? So there are some reasons why I don't think it's good as a sole source, with a few exceptions. And that's for like road running, where you're running a very consistent pace, where the aid stations are very consistently spaced out. And the staged races I've been doing,
yes,
the one I just did in Georgia, are more like road races in that regard. And so I did do a drink mix only strategy for that. And without getting too technical, that's also partly because I was carrying my own food for the week, and drink mix powders are the lightest form of calories as well. So that was a little bit of a unique situation. So I guess I could summarize all that by saying this stuff, the science is ever evolving, but also you need to be continually experimenting as well. And what you do for one race, one distance, one type of terrain won't necessarily work for the next one. So you have to constantly be trying and experimenting and learning new things. And everybody's different. So you have to try it for yourself.
Yeah, no, they're great comments. With regards to your stage racing, because I would just love to ask you about that. Like, we saw the amount of food you had for your Mikkipedia race, and you'd obviously calculated all the calories. And in my head, I'm like, is that really going to be enough? Like, were you hungry?
Oh, yeah. No, that's not enough. Yeah. No. I mean, well, you have to define enough, right?
Yeah.
Enough to, so there's a balance there. It's too much food. It's too much weight. It's going to slow you down. Not enough food is you're going to slow you down as well, because now you're in such a nutritional deficit. So you have to find the balance. And so it's not really a question of enough. It's where's that balance? And I think I found the balance on my second race here in Georgia.
Okay.
I had a little bit more calories. I was at about 16,500. And more importantly, though, it was less food for the run and more fatty foods, calorically dense foods. So my food was actually lighter, but with more calories. And so I think I really nailed it. And I do have a video on my channel with my breaking down my nutrition strategy for Georgia as well. But my approach, as I said, I was using drink mix powders for on the run. It also was dependent on the fact that I could accurately predict my pace based on experience and based on knowing that for me, it was like maybe I'd go 10 minutes faster or 10 minutes slower. I have enough experience to know that I was probably going to nail my pace times pretty well. So whereas I think if you're newer to the sport, you have to give yourself more flexibility, because if you plan for 5 hours on feet and it takes you 8 hours, you've run out of food after 5 hours. And so there's sort of my level of buffer was a lot lower than I would recommend most people plan for in an event like that.
Yeah. And I certainly thought, but I don't know that Jeff's got enough. Because I, as a nutritionist, I was looking and I'm like, could you put some coconut oil in there, Jeff, anywhere outside of, not during the running, but, have those extra sort of fat
coconut
calories.
Oil would have been good. I did have olive oil. So olive oil is, I think coconut oil might even be a little bit more calorically dense. I'm not sure, but olive oil is definitely one of the best things. And then nut butters are a close second. So I had a lot of those, and I would probably even do more of that next time. That stuff's just great for, caloric density and for fats, which are important. Those fats and protein are really important for a week-long event. Yeah,
that's it, right? And I also thought, because you run for like 4 or 5 hours, but you also have a lot of time to recover. And I was just thinking how I would feel. And I'd be like, I'd really want some treats now. Like, there's a serious lack of treats going on down. Yeah.
My first stage race was quite a few years ago. It was 2015, and it was similar to the one in Namibia, but actually a little bit longer. It was one in the States, and it was instead of 250 kilometers, I think it was 330, if I remember correctly. It was quite a bit longer. The days were a little bit longer. And actually, that first race, I did do powders as well. That was, again, years ago when I was still relying on powders a lot. And I went with the bare minimum. I was just under 15,000 calories. I was like 14,600 or something.
For the entire race?
For the entire race.
Yeah.
So just over the minimum of 14,000 for the week. And I burn quite a bit. I have a high base metabolic rate. And I was starved. I was starved the whole week. All I could think about was food. I was miserable. I was miserable. And in the end, I concluded that had I had more calories, I probably would have performed better. So you definitely have to find, again, it's that balance, right? And that's what's so fun about those races. It's an entirely new variable that you get to play with and experiment with.
Yeah. And if you have a preference for a race or an event, or what is it, Jeff? Is it the one and done, sort of the miler, or is it a stage race, or do you like them both equally for different reasons?
I like them both. I like them both for different reasons. You get more from the longer races, I think, in terms of a feeling of, at least I do, I should say, this feeling of sort of learning something about yourself. And, you really go through a lot of highs and lows. Forget about, bonking. I mean, you bonk 18 times, or, you're bonking every 4 hours and you're coming back from it. And so, you go through a lot of highs and lows. But I think that I enjoy the experience in the moment. There's sort of that type 1 fun and type 2 fun. And type 2 fun is the kind of fun that's like, it's fun in retrospect, right? Whereas type 1 fun is like fun in the moment. Stage racing is a lot more type 1 fun. Like, it's because you're done and then you can rest and there's camaraderie, and more importantly, you're sleeping. Whereas 200 milers, it's a lot of just zombie marching, and you get miserable when you're that tired. Like that's really hard mentally and physically, of course. But it's also, I think, not great for the body, not sleeping for days at a time. My doctor keeps reminding me of that. And so I think that definitely, as far as just pure enjoying the moment, I mean, stage racing is a lot more fun. It's also more sustainable, I think, from that physical standpoint. So, but yeah, there's something special. Forget 200 milers, even just 100-mile races, say a 24-hour event. There's something really special about running through the night and seeing the sunrise. And I think everybody should experience that, even if you're doing a race that just starts at midnight. I mean, there's something really special about running through a sunrise like that and feeling that sense of just rejuvenation, where all of a sudden it's like you feel like a new person.
Yeah, amazing. And Jeff, like you, obviously we, mentioned that you 10, 13 years or whatever in running. Could you have imagined that 15 years ago that, older Jeff will be making videos about these, miler events, 200-mile events, and this would be your life? Like, do you reflect back on that?
No, I mean, it's hard to think now back to that, but one thing I can say is that you definitely, a lot of us, like, we start by saying, I'd love to be able to run a marathon. So you run the marathon, and then you learn about that next distance, and there's always the next distance. And in the moment, it sounds like that is crazy. I can't imagine running 100 miles, or I can't imagine running 200. And now I just, when people say things like that, like, I just say never, because we all said that at some point. And so, it happens incrementally, and you fall in with the wrong crowd. And by the wrong crowd, I mean ultra runners. And there's always the next thing where it's like, you think that's crazy. Wait till you hear what this person's doing. And so it just happens incrementally. And I think it's hard for me to reflect on that, because you lose sight of where you started. You lose sight of where 10 kilometers felt long. I mean, I do remember I remember training for my first half marathon. This is one thing I do remember. And the longest I had run was maybe 5 or 6 kilometers at a time. I was a jogger, quote unquote, back then, before I really started running. I'd go out for the odd jog. And then one day I thought, I wonder how far I can go. And I went 11 kilometers. And it felt like such a crazy jump from 6K to 11 kilometers. And I was so proud of myself. And then I thought, maybe I can go 15. And then, let's do a half marathon. That seems crazy now, because I can run, a lot longer than that. And that's where it's not really, it's partly a mental barrier, right? And once you you push it a little bit each time incrementally. And and eventually you find yourself running for multiple days at a time.
Yeah.
It happens. And not everybody does. Everybody does, and not everybody should. I shouldn't say that that's not necessarily natural, but it felt pretty natural for me.
Yeah, nice. So Jeff, a few questions. Strength training, do you love it or do you hate it?
I hate it, but I think it's super important. I think it's one of the most important things, especially as an aging athlete. I don't love it. I love doing. I feel really good about it once I'm done. I get home and I feel really good about myself that I got it done. But no, I don't like being in a gym. I like the feeling of running, but I'm kind of lazy. Like, I also like sitting around. And, I like being outside when I'm outside, but it's hard. It's hard for me as well to lace my shoes up, and going to the gym is like, oh man, I got to get in my car, drive and go work out and sweat inside a building. Yeah. Like, where are the mountains, right? No, it's the last thing I want to be doing, but it is so important. And I've learned that. I came back from a serious injury in 2021. I had a hamstring tear, a grade 2 hamstring tear. That's almost as bad as it can get. I couldn't walk for a couple of weeks, yet alone run. And it took me a few months of rehab. And so when I came back, call it around April of 2020, I've lost track now where I'm at. It was 2020. Sorry, that was actually at the end of 2020 that I injured myself. So this is heading into my 2021 season. When I came into spring 2021, I knew that I needed to change something. And that for me to avoid this injury coming back to haunt me, I had to keep it working in the gym. And so I started going to the gym twice a week, working with a personal trainer. I have the luxury of being able to afford that. And every week for months, all the way through the season. And it never was a problem again. And I've continued to do that now heading into 2022. So, and I know I wouldn't have been able to come back and run 3,000 kilometers in 8 months, including a 100-mile race, a 7-day stage race, and a 50K race, all within that time, with not a single inkling of pain or any other issues. having had that serious of an injury, I would not have been able to do that without my strength training regimen. And I've been injury-free since. And strength training, it helps to eliminate imbalances. As runners, we tend to overuse some muscles and underuse others. And again, as an aging athlete, I'm in my 40s now. That's, I really need to prioritize strength and do less running and more strength training. That's really what it's all about. So, it's one of those things where, I've always known that, but I had to learn that lesson again and again until finally it stuck.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And my husband, Barry, he edits this podcast and he'll be listening to you saying that, and that might give him some more motivation to get into the gym, because he's like, well, I can just sit around for a week and moan and come back and then run and it's actually fine. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but actually the strength training is important, babe.
Yeah, and it's to avoid the injuries, but also to rehab them.
Yes.
And because these injuries can just become chronic and just ruin your season, and they can come back to haunt you at the worst possible time. And so, And so for me, like I've got a lot of goals. Like I just turned 41 and this is going to be a big decade for me. And when I think of that, like a decade, like I'm going to be 50 by the time my bucket list is huge. And for me to still be running into my 50s and hopefully still making films and telling stories and traveling the world doing it, doing multiple events a year, not just one race a year, I need to stay healthy. That's the number one thing, is I have to avoid injury.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. If I get injured, everything gets put on hold. And strength training is the way I will do that over the next decade.
Yeah, that's great. And you say that with such conviction. There's no chance you'll have injury amnesia that will keep you out of the gym. You forget about all those rehab exercises when everything's going fine. And then when something rears its head, you're like, oh, that's right. I was doing those calf raises, those,
And that's where everybody's different. For me, it requires working with a trainer, not because I need to, but because it keeps me accountable. I book those sessions 6 weeks out. It's in my calendar. It's more work to cancel it than to just go.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, before, when I was going to the gym on my own, I would sometimes, I'll push it off. I'll go in an hour. Oh, it's raining. I'll wait. Oh, now it's too late. Oh, well, I'll go tomorrow. So for me, I know that about me, that as long as I have it scheduled and prepaid, I'm committed. And so I think, not everybody needs that, but for me, that's what works. So I think you do need to find whatever works for you. Maybe it's having a buddy that you go to the gym with, if that keeps you accountable. The next step for me is to make sure, again, this is something I know. It's a do as I say, not as I do. I know I should be going and working with my physiotherapist on prehab more often. I should be doing quarterly check-ins, getting ahead of injuries that way. And that's something I don't do right now. I am getting better. I think the last component, so there's the prehab, there's the strength training, and there's the massage therapy.
Yes.
And again, it's expensive, but it can save you time on physio down the road. So massage therapy can also keep you off the injured list. Injuries are expensive. So we try to save money by not joining a gym, by not going for massage. And then we spend hundreds of dollars when we get a last minute injury right before a race and we panic.
Oh, completely.
So invest that money up front instead. And one of those things is having a good RMT to work with as well.
I love it. And I do know that you've got one of those little sort of Theragun type. It's not a Theragun, but it's one of those guns. I have one of them too. I haven't quite figured out how to use it, and I've had it for like 2 years. But I did.
I'm still working on it too. Yeah, I know. And then also a foam roller. I use a foot roller. I mean, a stick for my lower legs. There's all sorts of tools and contraptions. I don't know that there's no one thing that does it. It's just basically acknowledging that you need to always be working on that stuff.
Totally.
Like all that, always kind of thinking about recovery and staying on top of, that feels tight. I better do a little bit of TLC.
Yeah. So Jeff, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I do just want to ask you about your 2023. I mean, obviously you've just mentioned you've got a massive decade in front of you, and I love that forward thinking. That's brilliant. 2023, you have a couple of group runs, or you're hosting some events, and I'd love to chat to you a little bit about what that might look like. And well, this is kind of a new initiative for us, where we partnered actually with two different companies on two different trips. And one of them is a more of a hiking trip. Well, it is a hiking trip to Patagonia in March.
And that one is it's an 8-day trip, and we'll be traveling all around. We'll probably go for a couple of weeks and maybe do something else while we're there, maybe a bit of fast packing on our own. But that's a really exciting opportunity. And we're working with a guide. So there will be a trained guide. We're basically quote unquote hosting. We're almost acting as the travel agent in that sense. But we're going to add in some value added stuff too. We'll be going for some short runs, and we'll be doing some workshops and hopefully adding some fun things as well. I think the main thing there is, if you've always wanted to go to Patagonia, we'll put a good little group together, that everybody will be of share the same values and things. So, it's sort of maybe a little bit less risk that way of ending up with people that you don't really, get along with. And then the second trip we're doing is with a different company, and this is going back to do the Tour de Mont Blanc. So we're just about to launch this one, and it's going to be the first week of August, similar to what we did, fast packing the route, but we're going to take a couple of extra days. The days will be a little bit shorter, a little bit more time to enjoy the refuges. And the company we're working with will also be providing some additional support. So they'll be driving the bags to each refuge each night. So
amazing.
You don't have to carry as much stuff. Yeah. So it's going to be a really great opportunity for anyone who wants to fast pack the route. Again, wants to go with a great group. We have done this one before. We'll have a guide, but we have a lot of knowledge we can share as well now. And you'll have great support. Everything's booked for you. They've already booked the refuges, because you've got to book these things a year in advance now. So they've booked everything already for next year. So you just show up and it's all taken care of. So that one is a running trip. Every day we'll be running about 25 to 30 kilometers. So you'd have to have the fitness. And that's something we're excited now. We're going to be, we do make some money doing that. So we're going to be doing a couple of these a year. And it helps to sort of pay for us to get over to Europe. And then once we're there, we can take on some other challenges and do some other races. And it'll be fun too, just getting together with a group of people. And, we can make a film, of course, about our adventure there. So yeah, so that's new. I haven't set any other goals for the year yet, though. So I still don't know what races and events I'm going to target. I've got a bunch of things in mind, but I'm waiting right now to see if I get into the Hard Rock 100.
Yes.
Every year. That's my routine.
Yeah.
Is I wait till the lottery results.
Yeah.
And when I don't get in, then I plan my secondary goal.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
So fingers crossed, I finally get in next year. Every year it's the same.
Yeah. I know. I hear
same routine. Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
And Jeff, who inspires you, with your running goals and things like that? So who do you look to for inspiration? Be it someone, is it Audrey, or is it, or not? Actually, you almost have to say yes now that I've just asked you that. But in addition to Audrey, or...
Yeah, I take inspiration from a few places. I mean, I definitely, of course, follow the careers of people like Kilian Jornet, and, when it comes to the performance side of running. My friend Gary Robbins is a big inspiration for me, and some of the races he takes on and some of the events and the challenges he takes on for himself are a little unorthodox. I like that as well. But then I really love the stuff that say, like, I don't know, the Scott Jureks and, Ricky Gates of the world, where they're doing either fast packing or, trying to do FKTs on these long routes. And then that leads me into looking at what some of these thru hikers are doing, and, people who are just trying to do different things. Probably my one person I would probably say the most would be Ray Zahab, who's a friend of mine from Ottawa, from Canada. Yeah. And he's done... He started out racing. He's done a lot of the same Racing the Planet events and things, but he's spent the last it feels like a couple of decades now, just really focusing on adventures, on pushing the boundaries, running in virtually every desert and in the Arctic and the Antarctic. He does these multi-week, multi-month epic adventures that he puts together himself. The planning logistics are insane. And for example, he tried and failed. He likes to fail. I mean, it shows that you're setting the bar quite high. He tried to run through Death Valley off the road. This isn't like the Badwater race. This is right through the desert on the hottest day of the year, on the year that happened to be a record-setting year. That's right. So he's in the hottest place in the world ever on record, trying to run through the desert. And I asked him, I said, why don't you just go when it's cooler? He says, well, I've done that. I mean, I've done that before. Anybody can do that. I want to go when it's the hottest to see if it can be done. And I just really love his mentality, because he's trying to just push the boundary. And he's an aging athlete, right? He's I don't want to say how, I'm not sure exactly how old he is, so I won't take a guess at it, but he's getting older. So he's not trying to get faster. He's trying to just use his experience and his endurance to push the boundary that way. And so I find that really inspiring. And I hope to one day, we've been talking about trying to do an adventure together because I could learn so much from him. So we have a couple things in mind that are sort of, to him would be a baby adventure, but to me would be pushing my own boundaries a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. We all need friends like that, don't we? Yeah. I follow Ray. He is, on Insta. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's great.
Any podcasts you listen to, Jeff?
I actually don't listen to a lot of running podcasts, and I do that on purpose. Because I used to listen to a lot of running podcasts, and I try not to overconsume and overthink about running. Yeah. I spend so much time running, making my films, talking about running, hanging out with runners. So when I'm engaging with other types of content, I try to engage with different things. So I listen to a lot of business podcasts and kind of boring stuff, politics and, news commentary, like podcasts like On the Media and Radio Lab and science podcasts and stuff. So mostly boring stuff, but compared to maybe running things. But again, I do that on purpose because I just don't want to over consume any one type of thing. I want to make sure that I'm into economics and things as well. So I try to stay in touch with and be a well-rounded individual and not just obsessed with running.
Yeah, no, that sounds smart. Absolutely smart. And favorite food, Jeff?
Sushi, I think, would have to be it. I live on the West Coast here in Vancouver, Canada. We have some of the best and cheapest, most affordable sushi. Every block has a sushi place. We have some really good high-end sushi as well. 100% sushi. Yeah, we have a lot of wild sockeye salmon here on the West Coast.
Oh, yum.
And sushi happens to be my favorite food to consume during a race as well. So it's because it's rice, it's salty, and a little bit of fish sometimes. A little bit of protein goes a long way as well. Even just rice balls, like just rice generally is good when you're running. It's one of the foods that they recommend eating when you have like an upset stomach, like food poisoning. Rice is one of the things that's easy to digest. And again, the salt from the soy. So so sushi for sure. And maybe pizza is maybe a close second. I love pizza as well, specifically bufalina pizza. So it's like the pizza you'd get in, say, Chamonix or in Italy that has bufala cheese on it, bufala mozzarella.
Oh, lovely.
That's my favorite pizza.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And finally, who drinks more beer out of you and Audrey? I can't tell.
I think for body weight, she might have me beat.
Yeah.
She drinks almost as much as I do, but she's a lot smaller. Yeah. So we try not to overconsume.
No,
we drink beer probably every day, but we try to have maybe one.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many great breweries in Vancouver.
Yes.
Vancouver, at least for a while, was considered the craft beer capital of Canada. And we have so many great craft breweries. Some of our friends own and run them or work in them. And so, we really are into like IPAs and sour beers and just trying new things. It's kind of one of our favorite things. It's a challenge for me because I know leading up to a race, one of the things I need to do is curtail my alcohol intake. But when you're in a place like, the Alps, and there's cheap wine and good beer, it can be hard. So we try to save it for the recovery phase. But I don't advocate overconsumption of alcohol, but I do think that craft beer is something it's definitely one of the simpler pleasures, but one of the things we enjoy a lot in our lives.
Well, Jeff, I'm with you on that. There's nothing I love more than a brewery and a tasting paddle or a flight or whatever it is that you call it. And then just a range of delicious things that you get to try. And from a nutrition perspective, I think people are over concerned with the idea of having absolutely no alcohol in the lead up to a race because you still have to have that balance of recovery from your training runs and enjoying the if you don't run for a beer, why do you run, basically?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I think moderation is a good, it's a good thing to practice. Especially if you're training for a longer race. I mean, as long as you're staying hydrated in the week leading up,
you should be fine.
You can. Yeah, it's not. Again, that's the beauty of not training for, say, a marathon where every second counts. I mean, there's a little bit of flexibility here. So.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. And we will pop sort of links to your two trips, the Patagonia and the UTMB, or not UTMB. I'm sorry, the fast packing.
Yeah, the Tour de Mont Blanc.
Tour de Mont Blanc.
Well, that's the next one. The Patagonia one's pretty much sold out. But the Tour de Mont Blanc will be launching now, coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Amazing.
So, yeah. And I was just going to say too, we have a new newsletter that we're launching.
Yes.
So that'll be a way for people to kind of stay in touch and be notified of new videos. So if you visit my website, jeffpelletier.com, you'll be able to sign up for the newsletter there.
That is amazing. And is it J Pelletier in Instagram is your handle? Is that correct?
It's J Pelletier, exactly.
Yeah.
J Pelletier on Instagram as well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. And then YouTube, if you just search for me, you'll find me.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. And we'll pop links to all of those. And finally, do you use a teleprompter or not? Because I did not think you did.
You're going to have to wait to find out in my video this week.
Okay. Well, I'll let you get back to editing
What do you think? You don't think I do?
I don't think so. Okay. I think you're too crafted and experienced of what you do. You don't need a teleprompter. But hey, well, I'll find out.
Okay, interesting. You'll find out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Alrighty, so I cannot wait to be able to explore that part of the world. If you go to Jeff's YouTube channel and see just the amazing content he has on there, and you can just see how beautiful it would be to fast pack and run in the trails in Vancouver where he's at. And apparently it is beer capital of Canada, so why wouldn't you want to go? So I really hoped you enjoyed that interview. Next week on the podcast, I speak to Art Green, who is a well-known fitness and wellness inspirational figure, if you like, previously of The Bachelor, and we discuss his career and his interests and passions, which are very aligned with mine. So that's an awesome discussion as well. Until then though, you can catch me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, over on Instagram and Twitter at Mikki Williden, or head to my website mikkiwilliden.com, where you can sign up to one of my meal plans, the recipe portal access, and also book a one-on-one consultation with me. All right, team, enjoy the rest of your week and see you next week. See you later.